just such full of knowledge and just rolling.
Mhm.
Like just
I know.
good evening.
We are not worthy.
He might still be getting poked and prodded or
Phrasing.
he's having knee surgery right now. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. But through the miracle of modern medicine, he may still join us.
I think this is us today, right now.
I think it is. Bear with me. I'm just making sure that we're. All right, and we are live on YouTube.
Wonderful. All right, great. Welcome everyone to TM 101. For anyone who's new, joining us for the first time, welcome. We're happy to have you. For everyone who's been with us from the beginning, welcome back. We're thankful for everyone who's participated and been here with us from the beginning and continuing the conversation in TM 101 and expanding on the conversation and trying to teach and persevere and push a new generation forward. So welcome back. We are in webinar number 55. Super excited for this
54.
one. Are we 54 today?
I think we're 54. Yeah. We are 54. I thought it was 55, but we're 54.
Well, forgive me, episode 54, and then we'll see you at 55 next Monday. No, today we are going to be talking budgeting, which I'm super excited about. MJ and 5-1 have been just grinding and have so much knowledge to share with us, and as do myself and Adrian. We're all going to spearhead the conversation. I'm going to pass on to MJ and we'll just get this discussion rocking and start budgeting 2.0. So
yay. Okay. Budgeting for a tour is the process, as we know, where you lay out all the costs it will take to execute the tour successfully and plug them in against the tour income to make some money, ideally. Especially at a large scale level. As we mentioned, we did a little prep yesterday with Jed White, tour accountant extraordinaire, and his way of putting it was, the goal is to find the point of diminishing returns where the cost versus income gets you to a point where the artists, promoters, and management say, yes, it is worth it to put this show on the road. So that is what we are going to dive into today. Let's see, as a point of comparison, I'm going to share the homework from we did the budgeting homework. And excuse me here for a second. I'm going to share the screen. All right. You guys. Okay. So this was our budgeting homework that we did about a month and a half ago. So we have our summary, different expenses, salaries, which we have a few positions here, per diems, hotels for our one-off, flights, which this is just the template, so it's not really filled out. Okay, but that was our basic. So now we're going to talk about large scale budgeting, and we're going to have 5-1 take us through his budget, which is basically that on steroids. So we can get a feel for what a large scale budget looks like. So will you share your budget with us, and we'll go through it, 5-1, because it's pretty awesome.
Gotcha. And we've got Larry Richter who's joining us today. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So with Larry Richter, I know he's going to be chiming in today because he's also one of my accounting mentor giants. So here's mine. This is the last tour that I was putting together a budget. And before I even get started, there's two people I really have to thank, and that's MJ and Rocky over in the UK, because I've always done my budgets going from top down, and that is the scrolling was absolutely maddening. So Mary Jo and Rocky says you've got to like do things in different tabs. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So here's all the tour dates that we've had. I always like to do the mileage and the driving time because that also helps me figure out where I'm going to have some overdrives or have to bring in a team driver. And then here is the overall summary of the tour. And what I do is I also label how many tour days there are, all the time zone, because you're going to have time changes going from city to city. I add in the guarantees, which will total up to here, which will be our total guarantees. And I know, Mary Jo, you said we're going to get over to not adding in the ancillary costs, but I'll just bypass that for now. And then on our tour, we had production buyouts. So what production buyouts are is the promoter will reimburse you for some of your sound, lights, and video that you're traveling with. So we had a $25,000 buyout from the promoter per show that got added on top of our guarantees. So here was our total buyouts for the entire tour. So our total income for the tour was a little over almost $6.5 million. Then we get into all the stuff that hits you. Agency commission. Now our buyouts for the production buyouts was not commissionable. So the agency commission was just based on our total guarantees, not our total income with the buyouts. So the agency commission was this much. Our management commission at 15% was this much. Our business management commission, I just put it as 5%. It came out to this. So this was our net income after commissions. So basically this number here, our total guarantees minus all of our commissions was here. Then we had all of the various expenses from the tour, which I'll show you how these numbers came to be in all of these extra tabs. And so one thing that I learned from Alex Prince, I'm not sure if he's on today, is putting a pie chart, because the last time I was on a tour, the artist really wanted to see where all the money from the tour went. So I did a pie chart, and then I was speaking with Rocky a couple of weeks ago, and I said I also wanted to have a graph with the actual numbers, so it's easier. Some people like a pie chart, some people like graphs, so I did it both. So depending on the artist, hey, Henry's here. So, and what I ended up coming up with is a profit loss. So this tour was a profit of 33%. But if I go to salaries, here's my salaries and per diems tab. So one of the things that we spoke about yesterday was having a COVID compliance officer. So I added that to the budgets. So a little thing that Rocky helped me with and that I learned is if you come up with a little side item here of your start date and end dates, it'll automatically tabulate your total days for that particular person. And it would auto-populate over here for you, which I thought was pretty brilliant, instead of trying to figure it out individually.
I love that, because that solves the problem if people start at like different dates, which often happens. Yeah.
So you see I have different startup dates. Yeah. So I have different startup dates here, and it would automatically total the days for those people. And so this was what that person's weekly rate was for pre-production days, their daily rate, the total amount of days, if they got per diem for those. So it was pre-production, so everyone's at home, so they generally wouldn't get per diem. So their total salary with per diem. I had my lighting director, who was actually off-site. He was at upstaging, doing programming and putting together the whole show. So we paid him 7 days of per diem. So that's why his is a little bit different. So now I would also break it down: pre-production, travel days plus rehearsals. And I did it for everyone on the tour. So I had A party, B party, C party. And then here, for if I had a lighting, audio, video company, that's why you don't see any salaries, because with the vendors, they usually take care of their salaries and they're actually on their payroll. So there was no salaries for them, but I did pay them per diem on the tour. So that's something that you can always negotiate, whether if you're going to pay the vendor crew per diem. I always like to do it. I think it's just a nice gesture, or you can negotiate it with the vendors just to pay them. So it can go either way, but I like when I'm paying out per diem to people on the tour that everyone gets it, because having some people have it, some people don't, it kind of set up kind of weird energy on the tour. So hotels, I did hotels for everyone. And again, I did the total days, which would automatically populate the number of nights and the number of rooms. I had 6 drivers, so that's why you have 6 rooms here. And I broke it down per venue, the city, the state, and what hotel it was, and what the rate was. And what I did for my hotel rates is I made sure to have my travel agent send me everything, an all inclusive with tax, city tax, state tax. If we were staying at a casino or a resort, the resort and casino taxes. I wanted a final number for everything. So I did have team drivers that were coming in. So I added the team drivers. I did all of my A party hotels for the entire tour, B party hotels. And I just wanted to make sure, for me personally, I kind of like to do different colors for things so it kind of I can automatically go to it. And this is my total hotel cost for the entire tour. So $281,000. And if I go back to my summary page, it automatically populates onto my summary page. And I did the same thing with flights for A party, B party, and I broke it down to rehearsals, tour, and end of tour travel home for each individual party. So I had A party was traveling on a charter, so that's why you don't see a whole lot of flights for the A party, because it's going to be on my next tab, which is charter flights. So A party, B party, and I also did it for C party. Started the tour, rehearsals for everyone. And a thing that I have found that was really, really helpful speaking with business managers is class flown for the flights, because a lot of times the business managers will go, well, why is this person who is flying from the same city, their ticket so much higher than everyone else's? It's because they were flying business class and not coach. So that was just a little thing. I had the travel agent fee, which was like $50 per ticket. And then from our other panels of budgets that I learned from everyone is adding in the baggage fee. So Rocky also helped me with the formula for adding baggage fees for particular people. It could fluctuate, it could go up, it could go down depending on how many people that you have on the tour and how many bags they have. So I did the whole thing for C party at the end of the tour. And then I also did it for my team bus driver flights who were coming in and out of the tour. And I also had it for truck drivers who were also team drivers coming in for the tour. So same thing there, $65,000 in flights. And then since A party was flying on a charter to meet at the beginning of the tour and at the end of the tour, but we did have some long drives, so they wanted to fly from these particular cities. So I broke it down. And to show the business manager the different flights that we were doing during the tour, what the rate was, here's our total flights for the tour. And this is the MJ thing. I have to give mad props because I could not wrap my head around how to clean this up. But MJ, whoo, I love you so much in teaching me stuff.
I really like doing the breakdowns of my vendors on
Yeah.
on my budget. You
Yeah.
know, it's nice to have it all in one place and have a really detailed breakdown.
So when you did this for the buses and kind of walked me through it and the services and stuff, I thought that this was so much cleaner to show a business manager.
Mhm.
So coach rate, driver rate, administrative fees, DOT, Wi-Fi, satellite, any miscellaneous, other, the subtotal, total amount of days, and here's the total. And I had 6 buses on this run. So I had an artist bus, 2 band buses, and 3 crew buses.
And we should note that if this was Europe, then 5.1 would probably not have all this stuff
Right.
because they do it all in.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is not
And
as fun when you're super into details, but
yep. And the
it's more
same
fun when you're
thing
paying.
for sure. Uh, and then here's for trucks. We had 6 trucks on this run. Basically the same breakdown as doing the buses. And then the easy ones is production, audio, backline, consumables, lighting, video content, set design, set construction. And I also find that once I get contracts and stuff, I can kind of tie it in with business management. So on my budget, they know who all of our vendors are and they know which contracts to look for that are coming from them. Here's all the totals for production. Miscellaneous stuff like after show food, airport gratuities, excess baggage, artist car service, car and van rental, COVID testing, ancillary costs, which is going to be a subject that we're going to have to eventually talk about coming up. And then personnel. And this is a great Rocky thing is personnel, who's going to be on what bus. And then I've also made up a new sheet, which has nothing to do with budgets, but I also have bunk assignments that I'm now building a grid for. So that's my budget there. We started out, our summary was, our total income was $6 million, almost $6.5 million. Our net income after commissions was a little over 4.5 million. And then after all of our expenses, a little over $2 million, and we still made a 33% profit. So that's me.
5.1, where did
Yes,
you
ma'am.
have your float? Did I miss it?
I don't do float on here. That would be on like my road report stuff for like credit card reconciliation and daily. I don't add that to the budget, but I do
You
add
don't put up maybe a line item for, or do you, do you, maybe, are you covering those expenses? Are you breaking them down perhaps in what they may be like if you've got production float needs, if you're building stages, or if you're, all that first week of a production build is likely to be a $5,000 production float week for plywood and screws and nails and that things like that. So how are you accounting for what you're gonna need to pay cash for?
I usually put in a contingency fee, and that's how I usually cover that. And after speaking with Judd yesterday and other tour accountant friends, I've learned that people can put into their budgets a contingency fee anywhere from 3 to maybe 18%. But after speaking with Judd yesterday, he thought that 5% was a very, very good number. So let me just share this with you one more time here, and I can show you my contingency number. Hold on. But that's a very good question, Adrian.
Thank you.
So I have a contingency fee here of $119,000 on the tour. And maybe Larry Richter can also chime in on how he does it. Larry says he uses 5, but also has a category for expendables and day-to-day supplies at 5%. So that's very good.
Right.
I think also I
okay.
was going to say about cash, that kind of also gets absorbed into the other miscellaneous line items, at least in my budgets, like I might spend cash on expendables or whatever, but I have a line item for expendables. So I don't necessarily have a line item for cash, but like 5.1 said, it would be absorbed into the contingency. So, I wanted to ask you 5.1, why doesn't ancillary income go into a budget?
Because you actually don't know what it's going to be. And you don't know how much you're going to be selling in merch. You might have a general idea, from
Yeah.
the last run that you did. VIP meet and greet stuff, which may or may not happen after COVID, was another number you would never know, because that would also be based on a day by day thing. And you sometimes wouldn't even get those numbers until maybe a couple of weeks out. I
Yeah.
mean, you could do a guesstimate, but you never know.
Yeah.
Henry, do you want to chime in?
No, sorry, I'm working on something. Go ahead.
Okay. He looks like Bane today from Batman.
Yeah, he does.
Sorry, guys. I'm trying to
Right.
do the class, but I'm at work right now as well. So
Okay.
Henry's gigging, so
Yes.
he's live from the gig, so he's going to join us when he's
When
going to
he can.
contribute when he has a minute.
So with your 5-1, with the percentage, do you find that there's a rule of thumb of what percentage you want to hit, or does it just vary by artist?
I think it varies by artist. I've had some artists come and say, I want to come home with a 45% profit. I've had some say 20% fine with me. But I have also found some artists, if they're setting up a record cycle, they might not make any money on the first run because they're setting up
Yeah.
for the big tours. So they might take a loss on the first run, but they're playing the long game of, okay, when we go back out, we're going to be in arenas and stadiums and we're going to make a buttload of money. So we're going to take less now, but we're going to like recoup all of that and 10 times over on the big tour. So
Yeah. Or like we were talking about yesterday, like design. Sometimes
Right.
that just all rolls into the first leg and you just pay for it all and make, no money.
Yeah.
But
Particularly, I think that applies what 5-1 mentioned about being a little light on the front end, particularly in an album cycle when you're front loaded with promo dates, which are non-paying, and you still got to go do them. And,
Yeah.
there is or isn't production cost depending on what that promo situation is, but you've got crew and costs for that.
yeah. And then one thing we talked about when we were prepping yesterday was about how you never want to cut your number. This is on top of contingency. You never want to cut your numbers that you actually put into your budget too close to the actual costs, because, I don't know, you might have to, something might go up or you might have been off a little bit, because some of these numbers are often just estimates. You might be estimating flights before you've actually purchased them, or hotels. So I would love to ask everybody, what are some of your tips or tricks of where to guesstimate, or what you add in, or, what do you guys do?
I always find for me that I'm always making up money in hotels, and that hotels are a place where we can really, and that you're going to have to spend more money in the major markets. So Chicago, New York, Boston, Philly, sometimes, and then other, the LA, of course, and then the other markets, depending on if there's there may be some weird anomaly like a citywide convention that makes it impossible to get rooms, or it's a holiday or things like that. But a lot of times you can go, my God, I'm really breaking the budget here in New York City or Boston for these hotel rooms. Yet in other markets, maybe a smaller market or a secondary or tertiary market on your routing, you're going to save $100 a night a room. So that's really a place where I look at shaving. I start to also look at the cash expenditures after the first week of build. And Larry Richter made an interesting point in the chat, where he talks about having his expendables. I try to estimate a little bit, sometimes possibly on the higher side for office supplies and expendables and things like that. I'd break it out of the contingency. So, I might be micromanaging a little bit in those areas, but, we talked about it a couple of times, where how many orders of gaff tape, like every department doesn't need to be ordering supplies individually. They should all be running through production so that we don't have 45 rolls of orange gas tape, on the
when you
tour.
need one on a tour.
Right, right. So it happens. So, but these are the kinds of things when you're doing a budget, they're the little things that add up, tick, 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 that you want to watch and be able to adjust as you go along. That's mine.
I wanted to add to your hotels. You reminded me of a situation that we typically don't find out about until we get a call from our travel agent that maybe that B or C market has a citywide. And if you got what that is like some completely unrelated, maybe there was like a puppy convention going on in that B market.
The International Pipe Fitters Association suddenly has 7,000 people in the market.
Exactly. So then it wipes out all the best hotels in town, and they've been booked out and sold out for weeks or months. And then now you're like, oh shit, where do we go? And you're going to have to make decisions based off of that citywide of what's available, where to move to, if there's anything available. And even if it's a B or C market, you're likely going to pay, much higher rates because of the demand. So get your travel agents out there early looking at this stuff, because they typically don't find out those things until they reach out to the hotels. There's no like website that lists citywide events going on around the country, so it'll bite you in the ass.
Yeah, and if I think I'm going to have to buy the night before, sometimes you can get an early check-in, but if I think I'm going to buy the night before, I just put it in, and then sometimes you have a pleasant surprise. And also, I think that Larry makes a good point. Is he says that they lock in their numbers before they shove off, which is true. We all will do that, but I think it depends on also when you're writing your budget. Like, for example, often I work with business management who wants to see sort of a provisional budget before we lock it in. So I kind of have to come up with something, and then before we shove off, obviously we lock in the budget and we finalize it. But sometimes I feel like it's better to sort of guesstimate a touch high on that original budget. So all of a sudden I'm not coming back and going, okay, we've locked the numbers and now they're $50 higher a night.
Right. Larry Richter, another great point about truck and bus deals. They and MJ in her intro mentioned that truck and bus deals in Europe are all in. Well, that's becoming the norm here. And I am more and more are doing all in bus deals. And that's also because, and to Larry Richter's point, we want less and less to be dealing with that much float. So fuel and tolls and things like that, where we may have been, also settling these massive driver float envelopes. Now we're going to do those deals all in. We can basically estimate, we know where the tolls are, we know what the routes are. Things are so advanced these days. Also, we have touched on previously and will again, the new DOT rules. So things are we don't have the ability to be nearly as fluid as we once did. So it makes it a little bit easier in the transportation estimations to know what you're about to go and do and what that's going to cost you. And as Larry said, the old overdrive, we used to count overdrives and whatnot. We do not do that anymore, as Larry stated, and as we've talked about and will talk about again in transport and logistics.
I am very happy that the overdrive has gone away, to be honest.
I love how it's factored in as well, too. I mean, the inclusive deals definitely made it simplified the process, and you really know what you're getting when you're going into it. And it's come down to just helping the bus drivers, essentially. I'll take care of them and make sure they're all set. But for the most part, all the paperwork and everything's all handled on the bus driver side.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So we talked a little bit about what we do about auxiliary programs. Now, there's always more than one way to do a budget. Everybody's got sort of a different way. And again, it kind of depends on the size of the tour and how many ancillary legs and things you may or may not have. On some simple tours, I may choose to add the ancillary income into some column somewhere so that folks can see it. Other times I'm going to leave it completely out. However, I just want to point out that there are times when a VIP or an ancillary fan appreciation or incentive program of some kind may end up costing you some kind of money that you didn't count on because you weren't well enough dialed in to what was coming down the line. I caution everyone to make sure that when you're talking about these ancillary programs, that somebody, yourself or someone on your team, has an exact grip about the execution of this program. I have been in a situation previously where the tour carried a very, very heavy fan appreciation program that involved quite a bit of memorabilia and things like that. And in the beginning, the idea of how this would travel was underestimated. And what ended up happening was you've got all this incredible memorabilia. Now you need road cases. Now you need people to manage this, because the person that in concept was going to be handling this also has other jobs. So this now is a 2 or 3 person situation. Now you have another salary. Who's got that? Is it yours? Is it the artist's? Is it now a combo cost between the artist and the promoter? Who's benefiting? So this is just kind of a shots fired, heads up, get that area dialed in, have your line item or your space and look at it and get to know whether or not you're going to have any of these types of ancillary programs that at some point could go left or right and hit your budget. So that's what I have to say about your ancillary programs.
Adrian, did that person also require a bunk? And
well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And, you know, we ended up with things we needed to build cases for. Well, those cases didn't just roll down the road behind us. So that now we've got all these things that now require truck space and, you know, probably security and probably pipe and drape to find an area if there's not a room. And, you know, so things like that begin to get a life of their own. They may or may not be contributing revenue to the tour or the artist. You know, it's things like that. That's where in budgeting, you've really got to keep all your eyeballs open on the things that are not obvious. It's your out of the ordinary line items.
5-1. Diving back in with you, I have a question in regards to who is involved in the budget, who on your team needs to be intricately involved with you in building and tracking the budget. Can you go through it with us?
I would say the production manager, of course, because they're dealing with all things technical, light, sound, video, trucking, how many trucks we're going to need, how many crew people that we're going to need. So definitely the production manager. I would say definitely the business manager, because they are, and I would say management, the artist, of course, and Judd yesterday said whoever's designing the set would be integral, because that's going to be a big ticket item. But I have also found that the artists who do really, really well are involved right from the outset. So you kind of coming from top down, they kind of set the tone and having those conversations at the beginning. And that's, again, why I'm glad that Alex kind of shared the pie chart and the graph, because giving an artist a number, they don't really grasp what's all involved with that number by showing them here's where all your money is going to. And then especially if you have a design, someone who's designing something that's literally going to go in 6 trucks, that person is just designing it because it's the cool and the wow factor. They're not figuring out how many personnel is going to be involved with that, how many trucks is going to be involved with that, your labor cost that's going to be involved with that. So it's a domino effect. So if you have an artist who's involved from the front end, it kind of makes your life a little bit easier. And I've been very thankful that I've had a lot of artists who want to see the budget and actually chime in on budgets too. And having a great business manager and great management, my gosh. If you have those 3 artists, business manager, and a manager who are all on the same page and who are very, very involved, it makes doing budgets so much easier.
I could not agree more. And I've always said that transparency is gonna take us the furthest. Everyone needs to know what's going on, and your core group that needs to be involved with the budget. And I tell us a little bit about the creative process too, because you're going to be tweaking that a little bit along the way as you're building your budget and seeing where you can cut back and how it can be as effective as possible around the creative process of building the tour. And then sometimes the artist just doesn't care, right?
Yeah. But again, I think it behooves you as a tour manager or tour accountant or production manager to have that conversation and say, hey, we can do it. And this is something that Jed brought up yesterday. We can do it your way, and it's going to cost this much. But maybe and like Henry said yesterday, maybe we come up with an alternative, which is accomplishing the same goal, but is considerably less. Or how about if we meet in the middle and then everyone's happy? So again, it has to be an artist who's very, very involved, because in the end, it's their money.
Yeah, you need to be very careful how you attack that, because of course you're looking at it from a budget standpoint, but everything of that is tied to a creative element within that show. And so you can't just come in and say, I'm going to cut this because it's putting our budget out of place. That could send the artist into a tailspin, because it's their art form, their show, they get to decide. But if you can say, look, I can give you the same results, or maybe here's another way we can do this for less costs, then that brings your added value way up. And by doing that, you're earning trust with management and the artist, because you're thinking outside you're doing your job and thinking outside the box and bringing some solutions, and being that person stuck in the middle of, I want to keep the budget ready and in the black, and I want to keep the artist happy. And so that's a fine line that maybe is, unless you can talk to the artist directly about that, is a conversation best had with the manager first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you have such a great relationship with your artist, Henry, and as do the rest of our co-hosts. But I love how it does come with experience. That's what makes it 2.0, is it's that takes time. You really want to start with your managers and like follow the building blocks around that. But there is that unique dynamic where you are on a team for a long time, and you do have that relationship with your artist, and you can get in details about what's going on, and they want to be hands-on, and you can help them save money. And that's a very special dynamic to have with your team.
Yeah.
Passing the baton over to MJ, let's talk about finalizing the budget. You'll have to go back and forth tweaking things in the budget, adding, subtracting. But at some point, a budget needs to be finalized. So why is finalizing a budget important?
So I am of the opinion, and we spoke about this with Judd. He was prepping with us yesterday, and he feels the same way, that if you will go back and forth tweaking it, because when you get your first numbers, it might not be the percentage that the artist wants to hit. So you're like, okay, where can we adjust? Just like we were talking about, maybe with creative, or, to get it somewhere. But at some point, you need to lock it in and say, okay, this is the final budget. Because if you keep adjusting a budget, you don't ever have a solid number to work to. And for me, my budget is my roadmap. So I will constantly during a tour compare what is coming, what my actuals are, like what, like if I thought I was going to spend $5,000 on a hotel in Houston, and for whatever reason, my invoice comes in at 4,500, maybe we had dropped some rooms or whatever. Then I can keep track of that. I know where we're at. And then I have some solid data as well for future tour legs to base it on. But if you keep changing the budget, if there never was an original baseline finalized budget, then you can't really see that you're on track. And as Judd pointed out yesterday, there's no accountability for a vendor if you keep changing the budget. So if you never had that set quote or that set number that you agreed on, you need to be able to see if they're over or under, and say they're over, then you can go back and question why. And then maybe it's like, oh yeah, because here we added a set piece and we needed to add a truck. But if you changed the budget, you'll never really know why, because then all of a sudden that starts looking like your original budget number. So it just enables you to ask, if there's any changes, what was behind the change. It enables you to get a roadmap, keep a roadmap for your tour and stay on track. And also for me, it helps me because I like to keep track of what I'm spending along the way. It helps me to know where I am under. If I have that finalized approved budget, I'm like, oh, I'm under in this area. Shit, well, we're going to be spending some more on whatever. Well, it's okay. It balances out without even going into my contingency. So it's a roadmap. And that's why I think it's really important to have a finalized version that everybody agrees on of a budget. And that's it. That's your baseline version 1. And then you go from there. So, and I think, where are we at? I think Adrian had some questions about tracking the budget on large tours. You had some really good points about that yesterday.
Sorry about that. I was
Thank
muted.
you. Yeah. So we did talk about tracking the budgets, and there were interesting thoughts about fixing it in the mix. And that, that kind of lends itself. And this is kind of theory heavy on what a budget is. A budget is meant to be your roadmap for expenses. Are budgets fluid? Of course they are. You may be working with an artist that is just potentially on a promo tour, or maybe just is flush with cash. So you can have a bit of a floating budget, and you'll have an expense that comes out of left field, and you'll take it to the business manager and you say, look, this is an extra expense, an added gag, some things you weren't expecting, whatever it might be, and it could be a number of things. Well, we'll just adjust the budget. Some people think adjusting the budget is the way to go. Others are, and Judd put this yesterday so beautifully. He said, if you continue to adjust the budget while you're on tour, you never learn anything. And that's very interesting, because if you're just going to fix it, then you aren't learning anything. You're not figuring out you're not pushing yourself to continually look at it as an organism that's continually changing, and find ways to keep your budget, not break your budget. We can all break a budget. I could break the shit out of a budget for you any day.
Just like you can write any budget for any numbers anybody wants, but
all
doesn't mean
day
they're
long.
real.
And once you break the budget, good luck trying to get it back under control. So that was a really, really interesting point. There was also something that Larry, the great Larry Richter, who should really join us here in a second, the whole readjusting thing, and that was a big one. You've got to have your roadmap. And also, this is the time where you need to get your vendors together and create those relationships and have them do their due diligence as well, because you want to see what your vendors are planning to do. How many people, what are their ancillary charges? You don't want to have go, oh, what did we say this was? Make sure that you're doing it, make sure that even if you have trusted vendors, check around, get a few different RFPs and do some comparative shopping. Also, obviously you want to be able to, I'm just making sure I'm following along with the questions and notes. You want to be able to make sure that you go back and handle the accountability portion of everything, right? Because at a certain point, you're going to be taking the actuals, and everybody, again, are you plugging in those questions? I wanted to check in with the guys. Henry, can you answer a quick question for us?
Yeah, what's up?
So do you track actuals in a working budget as you go and reconcile along, or how do you make sure that you're staying true to budget?
It depends on what it is. Like hotels, I agreed with somebody else yesterday. I wait a little bit. I wait till I get the Amex statement actually, because that I know is like my final numbers. If you get the final bill from the hotel when you're checking out, there's probably going to be some like mini bar costs and some other costs coming into it. So it's not your true actual number. So for hotels, I'll wait till I have the final portfolio, and then I'll punch those in. So that could be a couple of weeks after I've already checked out. You know, the other things, I don't think I do it daily like some of you do, which is amazing and should be done. But it's probably bi-weekly that I think I'll actually go through and check off what my actuals are.
Mhm.
I would say I have to agree with Henry as well. I do give a little bit of some cushion on some leeway because there are these little things that'll pop up here and there, and I can be so OCD that like I just in my head do not want to just give them something too quick, and then all these numbers start coming back that are added to a number that I give them too quick. So I do give some leeway, and also if you, depending on who your travel agent is, like, I always am talking to them on a daily basis as well and checking in on what's come in on their side.
Yeah.
And they're pretty good with staying on top of it as well and trying to give you as true numbers as possible. So
Yeah, you got to
I-
make sure that you're getting taxed too, because I've been working with a travel agent recently that sends me a what they call a hotel budget, and I'm looking at it and I don't see the taxes, and you could have a city tax and a state tax and maybe a resort fee or some other strange thing that's tagged on top, and that's not a budget. That's a list of hotels. If you don't have everything in, that's 15 to 18% surprise party.
Yeah, that's a lot. And
Yeah.
and resort fees can be high. I like
Yep,
to
you
take
gotta
my when I get my invoice from the hotel, I like to log those. I don't log them in my my budget workbook. But I do have a separate sheet where I just kind of like jot it down what I get. And usually my invoice comes a couple days later. Like sometimes I have the travel agent gather them for me. It just depends on how much time I have and also what my role on the tour is. Sometimes you have an artist who just wants to go out the door and I don't have time to collect that. So I have the travel agent chase it for me. But
Yeah. If it's a vendor, then I don't put it in until typically the relationship I have with our business management is we have the payment schedule, so we know exactly what date we're going to
Yeah.
be paying the vendors. And so my business management will reach out to me. Henry, is this still approved? Is this
Yeah.
still the number? Yes. Okay. Confirmed. Send payment, and then I'll put the actual in that day so I don't forget.
yeah, for hotels, I put the actual I put what the receipt or what the invoice is, what the bill is when I get it. I just have a sheet that I jotted down. It's informal and nobody would know what it meant but me. But then when I get the Amex, I compare them because that's where I find if I have to chase anybody, if there's a difference. So then
Right.
I can kind of narrow down like, okay, who didn't pay for their mini bar?
5-1, what do you got?
I wanted to ask you guys a question because this is a little thing that I do on tours is the day that like a vendor payment is due, I put it in my calendar and it kind of gives me an alert that particular day. And it's kind of a reminder. So if the business manager doesn't send me an email, I'll call them and say, hey, that payment is due today. So I put it in my calendars for each vendor that's due. And then also I kind of put a little chime of when the Amex bill is due to come to me. So it's kind of like a little gentle reminder. Hey, the Amex bill is due. It's coming to you. Look for this email, and then you can kind of just go down and just double check everything. So I was wondering, do you guys do that by any chance?
I use reminders like that for my hotel. There are some gigs that are interesting and weird, like if it's a fly date or if it's a weird festival date and you might have to bring in additional crew or something like that. If I have a hotel with a particularly, and we spoke about this in the chat, a particularly tight and difficult or sold out hotel, I put my hotel cancellation date alarms in my iCal. And I tend to do that throughout the whole tour so that it's on my mind to not only, because again, you can burn up a lot of money in just in case's hotel room. Because just in case sometimes doesn't always show up. He's always on the crew or in the B party, but he does, certainly there's just in case in the A party. But then, if you're just moving too quick and you're not forgetting to clean up those rooming lists and things like that, the couple $100 bills here and there begin to add up. So that goes to tracking. I wanted to jump backwards 1 second really quick. A really interesting budgetary hack from Judd White yesterday. Larry Richter, this speaks to vendor crews and or VIP crews where you may be charging back for bunk space. Judd White negotiates those deals and then has the bus company bill back directly to these ancillary program folks who may be kicking in. So instead of then doing the bill back internally, for example, when you do your VIP program settlement, JP, you asked about if the VIP programs are separate. Yeah, they really are. They give you an income stream, but they need to operate within your entity as their own entity to a degree. So all of those expenses are kept in a separate place. At the end, you're going to reconcile them. Normally, you're going to maybe bill back truck space. Sometimes they'll have their own truck and that's completely separate. Sometimes you're billing back bunk space. For the purposes of the conversation about budget, Judd was talking about literally having the bus company and or truck company bill a portion of the billables directly to that outside vendor. I'm not sure how I feel about doing that. That might be a little bit outside of my master control area. I don't know if my brain will wrap around that, but I did want to make that interesting point because that's certainly, Judd White is the master. And if he thinks it's all right to do it that way, I would definitely take heed. I learn a million things from him a day.
I can only imagine at that tier level, like every little thing that you can get off your table is going to make the biggest difference for you in the day. Like I tend to have my hands in just about everything, but when he said that yesterday, I was like, wow, okay, yeah, that's
not
a
only
move.
does it free up your time in your day, but also at the end of the tour, so you don't have to do a massive email and phone calls to handle bill backs. That gets very confusing if you start saying, we'll handle it at the end of the tour and we'll bill back this company or that company. Now, that's the way I've been doing it. And Judd's way is like, wow, I could just get rid of all that work if I do it directly to...
I mean, I've set it up so that I have like a bill back schedule and the business manager is dealing with it. And I just make sure to keep on top of them, or we come up with a schedule before the tour. So I see it both ways. I think it'd be really easy to get it off my plate, but at the same time, if there's a mistake made or if the bus company doesn't bill, it's ultimately going to come back to us. So I see it both ways. Like I guess I'm a little bit too much of a control freak and want to see the big picture.
Yeah, and I also would be, I'm sorry, Mark, I would also be, I'm concerned about when things like that are handed off to business management or you're giving a piece of your ancillary business off to the bus company to now start billing for. How do we know if they're billing correctly? If it's too far off the radar, you can't track a mistake. That would be my only concern. You've really got to have faith in everybody that's handling the billing. I'd be concerned about
that's exactly what I was about to say was, how you do business, right? Like I know how I run the ship. So it's like, if I give that off to someone and say things don't go correctly through that pass off, that's a reflection on our tour, on me, on our vendor relationships. There's a little bit more on the line there by passing that off when confidently you can handle it on your own and just get it, make sure it's done. So that's the other side of the fence that
I also wanted to say about the Amex.
Yeah, I love the idea.
I also want to say about the Amex that I have been typically on the tours that I've done, I have my own login. So I go in and look at stuff as we go along. Like I don't have to actually wait for it to come. I know what the date is where it cycles, but I just kind of get in a groove where I go in and continuously look. And I also you can go in and add, they don't call them codes, but you can just add, like I can put hotels or I can assign it a couple of different identifiers. So I do that, which is really helpful for me because then I can print reports within the Amex. But I am really very much a budgets to actual person in my budget workbook. I might keep some side sheets where it's just like kind of like scratch paper, like I said with the hotels, just like jotting things down. But I really do, when I have maybe once a week or once every couple weeks, I'll take those numbers and really plug them in. Cause I do I would say at least once a week, probably more. I am looking at my budgets to actuals because I really, really use it as a roadmap to see where I'm at. So I'm very, fastidious about it.
Right. Also,
Probably more than most people.
I find that we tend to save money underestimating or overestimating the cost of flights, and that, again, that's another anomaly. You just never know what these airlines are up to and why a fare is going to be $500 different a day or two in advance. And again, you go back to those citywides in conjunction with the hotels and holiday travel and so on and so forth. If you're watching those flight budgets, you can find money there. There are a lot of, and there is a misconception, I think, that only watching your big numbers is what you should really be watching. I think you've got to watch the little things that you do on a daily basis also. Things that, because we're on a big tour and we're now, we're in the deeper dive, we're 2.0, we're talking about potentially arena and stadium tours where you're humming and things are, hopefully not going left and right. Let's just say, for example, that you're out there humming, keep it moving straight. But you should kind of know what your ecosystem is doing at this point, where, what's going on with after show food? How much are people consuming? What's everybody's habits looking like? You kind of begin to know your people. You're looking at the catering. You can start adjusting numbers. You might start ordering, like if you have lots of back-to-backs, you might start out ordering breakfast for your entire party. And then that the band's not getting up. Lighting, lighting is this many. What are you doing and how are you doing it? And can you grab and go for your earlies and then get brunch up faster? Do you know what I mean? And there's just a bunch of ways to start looking at things and going, now that we're here, now that we see what we're doing, let's start tweaking things. We know we can start shaving a bunch of money. And to answer your question, Gabrielle, what are some of the ways to cut costs and max revenue on a regional bus tour? I mean, same, watch your expenses, get to know don't just assume that what you think it's going to do, breathe with it.
I love that point. I as the tour gets started, you have your foundations of how you think things are going to operate. And then you notice there's a shift. Like, I love the catering idea. Like, say no one's eating in the morning and everyone's just like, we prefer lunch, like you start to shift gears with how you think it's going to operate, and you can save money that way over time.
Or you have a really wacko rig, right? And there really isn't time for your folks to go into a dining room and sit down and eat pancakes and eggs and have a coffee and whatever. So it's possible that what you want is some nice human with a bunch of hearty breakfast grab and go options waiting to greet your guys as they're standing there chomping on a burrito, staring up in the ceiling, chalking
breakfast
and walking.
Burritos are always, in my opinion, the best breakfast.
And then you bring your lunch meal up at 11 o'clock, right? So you've probably maybe saved quite a few bucks ahead, just thinking about what's really happening out there on the road, who's going in at what time, and how can we fix this? And also, just to one little final before MJ, you pipe in, is that you're also making sure that your humans are getting fed if you're paying a little bit of attention with your production coordinator or your hospitality person or whoever's doing that. If you guys are going, hey, so who's eating in the morning? Is everybody getting fed? What crews are, you run around with a box, give everybody a burrito, even the runners can eat, right, MJ?
I was going to go along with that and say, on a regional bus tour, one way that you can maximize revenue, and this is if you're selling well and you're trying to cut some costs. This isn't so much budget, but on your show budget, make sure that you advance. And when you're creating your rider, make sure that you advance. You don't just send out the hospitality rider at the beginning of the tour. Do it day by day, because you're going to find money in that budget. And like Larry said, they give their tour caterer cash for buses each night and save what's left. So instead of, even on a smaller regional bus tour, you can ask for, instead of ordering like pizzas for the bus or whatever, you can say, hey, we just need $50 a bus. And sometimes you'll buy like $20 worth of stuff to put on there. But in terms of the budget, I mean, I think that cut costs and maximize revenue. I mean, a lot of times, like, you can agree that you're not going to pay for rooms the night before. It really depends on your artist if they're willing to do that, and you can try to find hotels where it seems like they're not going to be sold out the night before. Booking business hotels on a weekend is a big one, because business hotels where people normally, like business people who are taking, work trips, would stay on weekdays, they're pretty empty on weekends. Might not be near much, but 5-1.
But what I've done on my tours, like after the second or third week, along with my coordinator, we will go through all the dressing rooms and just kind of observe what people aren't eating and just start cutting that out from our advance for the next few upcoming shows. And another thing that we do on our tours is I have either a Costco or a Sam's Club card, and I will go before the tour starts and I'll stock all the buses myself with, like, extra bottles of wine, water, snacks and stuff that'll last us like 2 or 3 weeks. So once we get into a tour run and we're like 2 or 3 weeks in, we don't have to pay, all that extra money, because we've saved money a little bit by going to Costco and buying this huge amount of stuff at the beginning of the tour. And we just keep it in the bay of the bus, or we just put it in the back of the truck and up in one of the lofts. So it's always easily accessible. Because another thing that, water, for the truck drivers and bus drivers, it's easy for them also for those rides, so they don't have to stop and get out. They can just go to the back of the truck or at the end of the loadout and just grab how many bottles of water they're going to need for the next drive. So there's just small things, observing what people aren't eating anymore in the dressing rooms, doing a Costco buy at the beginning of the tour. And then also, those are the big ticket items, but those small things make up big things over the.
This is going to seem incredibly counterintuitive for a regional tour, but something that I always would budget, and I definitely do on larger scale tours, is that people don't think about maybe on a smaller tour, is I budget for an extra runner out of pocket the first day of the tour. And then you get together like all your shopping and things like that, and you're not piecemealing. So like if you're on a tour where you don't have runners or a lot of runners, what may happen after that first couple of days, or if you don't have a runner the first day or two, and you can get all this shopping out of the way, that people find is you're going to end up having a lot of your crew like taking Ubers to go to like Guitar Center to get those strings they opened up the case and forgot, and so I personally feel like budgeting for a runner and front loading the tour that way, like, oh, I'm going to spend $250 that first day on a runner. That might seem like a lot, but I have just reduced, random Uber receipts and just people being gone off site, buying stuff that's random for probably the whole tour or for the next few weeks. So that, for me, even though you're spending money, I feel like in the big picture, especially on a regional tour like that, saves money. Because then you can get a grip on where you're at.
I was going to say a big thing. I hope I can explain this correctly without sounding cold-hearted, because as a tour manager, production manager, we have to make hard decisions sometimes, and sometimes
I know exactly where you're going with this.
I once saw a tour that this particular gag at the start of the tour needed 6 carps to do the show queue. And after a week of shows, they figured out that it could be done with 4 people. Now, that is where you're faced with the tough decision of, do you cut them? Is there still value with keeping them on? Am I screwing the pooch by letting these people go? Or am I making the right decision to save a lot of money by letting these people go? And so there is some, hopefully you figured that out in rehearsals, but there is something to this and now I'm talking like large scale tours. where you sort of front load the crew a little bit to know that the tour is going to be able to be handled, and every gag and bell and whistle can be operated efficiently. But as the tour goes, by week 2, we've got the groove, and we can see that everything gets streamlined, and you may be able to save a lot of money by unfortunately letting some crew go. And that's not something that you want to find a position you find yourself in, but I've seen it and I've been there. And so these are tough decisions that you will have to face in this career.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. To that point, I think also, and to Mary Jo's point, runners, watch your need for A-party runners. Sometimes you might need them, sometimes you may not. Sometimes they're budgeted. Just watch if you're on a big tour that has a number of runners, can you lose them occasionally? How does that work? For a regional tour, I have hired on shorter runs where there was not enough in the budget for a production coordinator assistant. I did hire a local PA, not runner, a proper bring your computer to work. Please make sure this person, has been a PA previously. I have hired a local PA in each market, and that saves you probably you've got a less of a day rate, but it certainly saves you a bunk, a hotel, flights, and a per diem. So for a shorter regional tour, hiring local support is a great way to tweak up that budget. Julia asked about eco-friendly and saves money in the long run. Yeah, I have to say that tightening up after show food and that the food waste, tightening up your catering numbers, walking through there and keeping in, if you have a tour caterer or if you're using the local rock and roll caterers in the markets, which are, we love them too, but go see what you guys really have as far as how you're estimating your numbers. Because the thing is, and there was a question, Elise, also in the chat, I think it was you that asked about repurposing lunch meat and stuff. There's a lot of tricky business about repurposing food that's been served by caterers. There are repurposing laws, food service safety, public health laws that prevent you from giving the local homeless shelter your leftover catering. Can't do that in in most places. Now, on a lot of tours, people are starting to make after show sandwiches, or if catering has something particularly yummy, particularly if people are health conscious, you start to see people taking leftovers to the bus or making a sandwich or something to the bus. I frown for food service and food safety issues, and we're not going to spend too much time here, but personally I frown on the caterers reusing things that have been sitting out for a meal period to feed somebody a meal 8 hours later. We have a budget to not have food safety issues.
Your crew real sick doing that.
I don't want to be reusing food. If I want to make a sandwich and take it to my bus, or make a salad, or take something and take it off, that's my thing. But I'm not for the repurposing of meals for later. I also don't want to see the same thing on the line twice in a day, but that's just me.
I will say also though, it's especially even on bigger tours actually, but definitely in smaller tours, like you always see the dressing room stuff coming out to the bus to stock the bus.
Right.
Like that was my thing when I was like doing club touring. Like I always would put a bag of Ziploc bags on, or a box of Ziploc bags on the rider so that they could pack it up and throw it in the bus.
Right. And I'm also all about running through the dressing rooms before we go and taking the fruit and taking the chips and taking expendables that we always we pay for all those things. We own it. And I'm, again, these are the kinds of things also as far as eco and savings, the dolphin pumps and 5-gallon water jugs instead of flats of water. If you can retrain people to carry water bottles and go to a pump and refill, you're saving because people aren't opening a water bottle, taking 3 sips and leaving it on a road case and not remembering where it was. Single-use plastics is a big deal. Flats of water is a big deal. So if you can get people attuned, you can put, 2 in catering, 1 in every dressing room, on each side of the stage at the docks. You can put them everywhere, and it's still going to be less, and that's eco-friendly. And that's just a quick tip on that one.
I was also going to say, if you haven't checked out our green webinars yet, we go in depth on our green initiatives, and we have a 2-part series with our green initiative. So if you haven't checked that out, please go and check those webinars out. We can talk about dolphin pumps all day. I mean,
Right. Yep.
I love it though.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I do work on a couple of tours where, the request is local growers, farm to table preferred, everything organic. Some things are going to be more cost effective and eco-friendly can be more or less. So just, there are ways to do it, but you have to approach mindful touring. You really have to look at it.
And, building a budget is an art. And just very quickly, there are some intangibles that you learn to take into consideration. And I think we've all touched on that a little bit. And we've touched on how building trust with the artist is an important part of budgeting. So like if the artist, a lot of artists these days are like it's really wonderful when you work with an artist who is very budget savvy and very business savvy and has a clear picture of what they want and understands that they ultimately have veto power on anything, but they're usually, I don't know, in my experience, maybe I'm just lucky that they're pretty happy to have some parameters, once you kind of get there with the budget. But beyond that, getting to know the artist's priorities can help you budget things a certain way from the beginning, even if they're going to cost more, so that there aren't surprises, you get in there and they're like, I want to take this charter. And that's a really important thing when you're budgeting, especially on a large scale. And they are legitimate budget items. And I wanted to we talked about some examples. I was going to give my own example, then ask, Henry had one. I think everybody probably has one, but my example was, a few years ago when I was working with an artist who was doing a one-off. They were doing a private party. We were all based in London, and the private party was in Barcelona. And typically this artist actually liked to fly commercial. They would fly first class. They like to do that to save money. But flying commercial in and out of Barcelona was going to take up basically 3 days, travel day, show day, and then maybe fly home late, but probably the next day, to where, it was going to cost a lot more to charter a flight. However, the artist was in the middle of recording and had session musicians under contract and everything. So I proposed in the budget, we should charter. Yes, it's going to up the price, but what's the added value here and what's your return on investment? Your artist is going to be away from the recording studio for I think it was all in 10 hours, as opposed to 3 days where you are paying musicians, and you're paying the studio time. So sometimes, especially when you get to a large scale, you have to think about those things. I think Henry had some examples as well.
Well, yeah, it was the same situation where my artist had to fly, and we decided to go with a charter plane. It was rather expensive at first, and we thought, oh no, he's probably not going to want to do that. But then the artist came back and said, you know what, do it, because go ahead and book the plane, because the 3 hours that I'll have to myself on that plane, I'll be able to knock out the next song, or I'll work on the interview questions you guys sent me. The artists, like you said, see the added value. If you can give that artist time so they can write the next record and the next single, then we're just feeding back into the system, because we want to get new music out. We want to make sure that we're, getting back out on tour. So there, like you said, the return on investment was there, and anticipating that, this is going to be worth it, and bringing that to the table, once again, added value.
Yeah. And once you get to know those things, you can kind of just anticipate. Like if you know you have an artist that wants to stay at a certain level of hotel, and yeah, it's more expensive, but hey, if you opt to try to put them in a cheaper hotel, you're just going to pay double because they're going to want to move. It's like, might as well just start plugging into your hotels or your budget certain levels of hotels. You know?
I budget high for A-party hotels. And that leads me to just jump in with one. We had a question from an anonymous attendee in the Q&A. Gratuity and tipping. Who do you tip and when? And as ostensibly, where does that go in the budget? So this is generally for B and C parties, you haul your own luggage, you're not tipping unless you have a situation where now A party is a whole nother story. I will have a gratuity line item where I'm going to estimate, where I might, you have that put on the folio for your A party. B and C parties are going to haul their own luggage unless you are coming in hot from a one-off. Maybe this is a fly date and you've got luggage that's going to go straight to the hotel and the bodies are going to go straight to the gig or what have you. Then you're going to know that in advance and maybe have a porterage fee that you negotiate with the hotel in advance if you know that you're going to have that situation. But generally, it's, you may have that in contingency again, because budgeting really is, when it comes down to actually where you put all of the little line items, it depends on how much information you feel like you want to see and where you feel like the folks you're sharing the budget, do they really want to micromanage? Do they want to see all that information? Do you want that information? It could go in your contingency. If some folks do or do not have a float. I do have a production float line item that I put into my production expenses because I kind of have a feel, depending on the tour, of what production float ancillaries for the build will look like. So perhaps I'm going to put in a $5,000 float expenditure for the first week, which includes maybe 4 or 5 days of production and tech rehearsals and a show day, and then moving on. Do you know what I mean? So that was just the last couple of roundups that I wanted to throw in before we move on.
5-1. Oh,
What are we talking about? Tipping still?
5-1. Oh wait.
No, we
I
moved
think
off
we're
of
moving, we're
tipping.
moving
Oh, okay.
on.
Yeah, we're moving on. We're moving on.
We're moving on to our case study.
Right.
So let's talk about COVID and to our budgets, because this was a huge discussion yesterday. So I'm going to lead it off. I've had conversations with several other tour accountants on our budgets post-COVID. And all of you guys, with the exception of myself, are COVID compliant officers. So one of the questions that I brought up yesterday is, if we're traveling with an A party, a B party, and a C party, should I have a COVID compliance officer that travels with each party? And on top of that, like security, should we also budget in a COVID compliance director who Mary Jo brought up would need to probably go to the venue in advance of everyone else? And should we start thinking about that? And then on top of that, what should we budget for as far as supplies on the road? Like testing kits, masks, gloves for the tour. And outside of that, are we going to be seeing artists selling masks at their shows? So I want to start with Henry first about the COVID stuff.
The loaded question. Where do I want to start? COVID compliance officer. I think now I don't know if this was said, but there's so many thoughts on this. It's very new. So, but I would think that what we're going to see is a COVID compliance venue director. my COVID compliance officer that I have on site now is basically in some way the equivalent of a venue security director. The role and responsibility of that job in some ways sits above a tour and production manager, because they are calling all the shots on the health and safety for the tour. So just as a security, my security director could sort of tell us what to do when it's in the matter of health and safety, we listen. But the number of officers that you would see underneath that director on tour, I think is a number each tour needs to look at. I don't think there's a set number, except within the COVID guidelines that are published out there today. Technically, you're supposed to have one officer per 25 people. So if you're following that as a number, then increase accordingly. But then as well, your other question of the costs is, yes, there's going to be an absorbent amount of cost to this. Even just that director job should be paid accordingly, as a lead. And then the amount of supplies, I suppose, is we're going to have to find, the base price times X amount of people times X amount of days to be able to get a budget number. As far as testing goes, that's sort of there's a wide range of things that we could, and holes that we could go into as far as tests, because there are rapid response tests, and then there are tests that take a couple of hours, and each of those have different price points. So it's hard to say which one you should be doing and how much all of that is going to cost at this time. But man, it is a pit of black holes that we can all go into on each of these. But I love that we're at least having the conversation. Hi, Larry Richter.
Hi, Larry Richter. Elise, my question is that COVID compliance certifications are based on film and TV. So just a little bit of my experience, having just done 5 weeks worth of production in Los Angeles under the guise of the COVID compliance guidelines that are issued for film and television. So to give you the genesis of where this is coming from and how we see it transferring to music and touring, the initial guidelines that everyone's working off of are from the Los Angeles County Health Department. It's Amendment J to the normal proclamations of health and safety. And it's the safe opening for television, film, and music, video, and production. So when we say music, video, and production, this also governs recording studios as well, okay? So then what ends up happening is SAG-AFTRA and IATSE and the DGA, which is the Directors Guild, also then issued joint protocols, okay? These are the protocols that everyone who is, if you're now understand IATSE is in here. So what's happening right now in the world of the small production things that are happening, I can speak to things that I know about that are happening in Los Angeles that are live stream or, smaller socially distanced shows or what have you. What Henry said is absolutely correct. On our set, we had a health and safety officer, and then we had the COVID compliance team, which consisted of, because we tested over 2,000 times, right? So we had a health and safety officer who also had, the traditional health and safety concerns of a running set or with multiple locations to look after. Then you have the COVID team. The COVID team had a very strong production coordinator and a COVID compliance director. They worked in tandem because imagine you have people flying in and out from various places. You have some people that live locally. You have talent that's performing without a mask. So all of these things are taken into consideration, right? So just to keep it really simple, there are talent zones, which is zone A, which is a mitigation. It's all about the mitigation protocol, right? What you're doing for testing and stopping the spread. It's about where people move and walk, who comes close in contact with talent, So when you ask about specifically how this transfers to touring, these protocols will be effective for how we keep our cast and crew safe as we come back together. So these are the kinds of things we were chatting about yesterday. Now, there are nobody's really going out. Who's policing this is the question. And this is a question that's come up as the industry tries to figure out how to move forward. Well, who's policing you? You are. Basically, the COVID compliance officer is required to report a cluster to the health department. If you have more than 3, they got to send people home who screening is required, testing is not. Let's just back it up. So if you find that somebody tests positive, you got 3 people, that's a cluster, you got to report. But for example, on all of ours, the health department folks and the SAG-AFTRA folks and the IATSE folks who were monitoring us very closely because we were so big, we had children on this production, there were non-mask wearing moments, there was testing every day for talent. Zone A folks tested every other day, certain people who didn't come, there was a lot going on. And for people who were coming at the last minute to maybe potentially do a gig or work, you had to factor them in for testing. How long does it take for them to have results? So you can't have a spot inspection because they're not allowed into the bubble to inspect you. So there is an incredible amount of self-policing and self-accountability to how we're going to have to run things, and the accountability that venues are going to have to take, and the accountabilities that touring parties are going to have to take. So the budgeting is going to go according to, we'll see where we are when we open back up, but you're going to have a touring position and you're going to have a venue position is what we think we're talking about. And security folks are likely to now, keeping in mind as we move forward, the COVID compliance positions are not a crossover. It's not a twofer. These are going to be standalone positions. So while you may have a security, I'm a tour manager, but I'm also now a COVID compliant officer, a road manager, a production coordinator. One thing at a time is what I'm trying to say. It's a position that is not meant to be split with another position because there's actual work that needs to be done. So mindfulness is going to play in here, please, guys.
Larry, I wanted to ask you, rolling on from what Adrian was just saying, so we will, because of this, we will potentially see, and obviously this is a case study, so we don't know for sure, but guessing, we'll probably see more people on the tour, more staff because of this, needing to do this to get back to touring safely, which will mean more buses, potentially less people on buses, potentially different hotels, because, we might have to have more secure hotels. We might have to have hotels for crew. We might not let crew go out on their days off. We might have to have hotels with room service. Just any kind of that stuff. Profit margins for the artists are going to get hit. So where do you see us making up for this in the budgets? Oh, you're muted.
How's that, better?
Yep, we can hear you now. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Well, as a promoter as well as a touring guy, I promote 50, 60 shows a year, have 3 venues that I'm exclusive at, and we're trying to figure it out from that. And one of them is a casino as well. So there's really a lot of eyes on. I don't have an answer for you. I don't see my big tours, there's not an extra bunk anywhere. I mean, we're talking about an extra bus now. That extra, can we absorb the cost? Yeah, there's going to be a way to absorb the cost, which is going to be to pass it on for an extra $5 on every ticket. I mean, it's going to have to trickle down to the consumer. The buildings are going to be certainly responsible for when we walk in their back doors. And we have to get ourselves there safely and not walk in the door with it.
Right. And what as far as buses, what we talked about is that a 12 bunk bus is probably not going to be a thing that we do anymore. We're probably going to have to go down to condo style with a junk bunk and 6 folks on it. Where do we get that money? Perhaps production's going to be smaller.
We start to have less production value.
Yeah. The design is going to change. Yep.
The designs will change, and we're going to go back to smaller size productions and, you know, true talent. It's going to be an interesting shift to see how we move forward safely. I believe it can be done, but, you know, we're going to have to see how we develop along as we go here.
You just put your finger on it. The two words, true talent, because that's what's going to guide reality and non-reality. Because you can hang a light bulb over Eric Clapton's head and have a great show.
Seriously,
There's a
Neil
lot of
Young
other people
plays
that
in the
can't.
dark. Neil Young plays in the dark with one light, and it's a surreal experience. So, you know, well, we're gonna have to return to the, I believe, to some degree. I keep picturing in my own mind, I'm picturing touring of the 70s almost, with higher tech, but, you know, sleeker and higher tech and more efficient. But, you know, flying through the air is going to be replaced by a COVID compliance department, perhaps. You know, shared costs of frivolous touring costs will now probably have to be replaced with crucial, you know, frontline staffers.
I hate to say it, and it scares the crap out of me, because I've just moved 40 plus shows out of 19 into 20 that are now moving to the end of 21. Never mind the tours I was meant to be on myself this year. How do you go from Buffalo to Toronto? Never mind going to Australia or Japan. What are you going to quarantine for 2 weeks? I mean,
whole other story. You know, we're trying to just talk about, we haven't even, again, you know, you're talking, crossing a border.
Crossing the border, yeah.
Yeah.
Right now we can't, you know, so we can't, you know, again, everything that we are chatting about concerning COVID is clearly and highly so speculative. We, you know, even though the TM 101 was born out of COVID times and a lockdown and a cancellation of our entire industry due to COVID, we avoided any speculation. Now that several of us have, and our attendees and friends and colleagues, we've got stuff under our belt now. We can speak to it because we've lived it in real time.
Yeah.
You know, Henry is, as you can see, still currently living it. I still now have a person that is still on site where I left him, and now has to travel back somewhere where the quarantine rules have changed. So it's a week-to-week thing with COVID. And because that's an organism and so new to us, you know, we're trying to really, as an industry, you know, be in data gathering mode at the moment, so
Larry,
that we continue to have our pulse on them.
Larry, as a promoter, I mean, do you think that the public will, I know this is all conjecture, we haven't gone there like Adrian said, but I think this really ties into budgeting. You know, it's the one area where, like, it really does make sense to sort of think about this. And like I said, it's a good case study, but do you think that the public will pay more? I guess we just don't know.
I absolutely do. I mean, in my venues and for some of the large artists I work for and some of the stuff I wrote before, we'll sell you the front row chair with the artist's name on it, you know, which is a profit center for us as part of a VIP package. I believe we went through this. We did social media and exit polling in 2008 from that recession. And what we thought, the answers that we got was, I need to get the wife out a couple of nights in the summer to see a show, but we can't afford to buy the extra car or the new washer dryer. So I do believe, and especially after this, people are going to be dying to get out the door. And is there a price point for everybody? I do believe that there is. Otherwise, I'm out of business. You know,
Yeah, we had a healthy chat amongst ourselves yesterday about price points and the return to having crowds and consumer confidence, you know, versus the need, you know, everybody needs to get out and see a show. I myself will split myself in half on that. Part of me wants to go fling myself out the door and get my head in front of a PA as soon as possible. And the other, you know, part of me is going, well, are we ready for that? You know, are we spending that kind of money? For most people, remember, a night out includes the tickets and the parking and the dinner and the babysitters and the, you know, whatever for where we are right now. It's, we'll have to see, you know.
Well, I have to hope on the one hand that with all this time that these artists are going to be having on their hands during this time period, never mind the virtual things that they're pumping out there, that the result is going to be some good new product, you know?
Right.
And those who deliver should deliver big. I mean, look at what's
Yeah.
going on right now from Springsteen to whomever is addressing what we're going through. So I have to be optimistic. I've been said, you know, people have asked me, what are you going to do if you can't do what you do anymore? This is what I do. So one way or another, whether
We'll
it's
adapt. Yeah, we're going to
going
adapt.
Flaming Lips route, you know, whether it's going the Flaming Lips Wayne route and sticking people in bubbles, which just sounds absolutely bananas. No comments, but you know, there'll be a way. There'll
Yeah.
be a way. The music will live on, and if it doesn't, then man, I'm at a loss.
You know, I think in some ways though, it's, I mean, I'm going to sound like I'm a very glass half full person here, but like, it is interesting. And, you know, in the context of what we're talking about with budgeting and making it work, like that is going to be a whole new, you know, it's a whole new thought process. How do we reinvent that? I mean, you know, we're going, you know, back to, I mean, think about it. Back in the early days of touring, artists just got paid a nominal fee and the promoters walked away with everything. And then, you know, we moved into the Led Zeppelin era. It was like, okay, we're going to split this, you know, it's like, so it's like, we're probably, you know, this is an opportunity to transition into how do we work this with budgets? Yes, touring was a monster, productions and everything, but think outside the box, I guess.
My worry is this, as a promoter and as a touring guy that needs them on the road so I can earn that part of my living as well. I'm making right now, I have 50 offers out for major artists that can do arena type of business, offering them the same money that they sold out for me 2 years ago, okay, based on full capacity. The real question is going to be, even if it's vaccine a year down the road, whether everybody's taking it or not, when I come back and say we can only go 70% capacity, so cut your guarantee, but you know, down by 30% to that 70%, so all things are equal, who's going to stay home and play golf and say it's not worth it? We have enough money in the bank, you know? And who's not Kenny Chesney that can afford to pay all their guys to sit home this summer? I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot of people retiring from touring. Some of those guys that are getting a bit older, as much as they love to play, you know, Frampton and the Doobies doing their thing the other day put a smile on my face, you know, while having to wash it over my damn computer, that sucked. But you know, the music has to live. It's got to live. That's why we're here, right?
I agree.
Yep.
You know, I think it was mentioned, but I wanted to reiterate it for a second. We only touched on it, but living on the road right now, I'm out working and asking our crew to stay in and basically, you know, be in a hotel jail for X amount of days is not like it used to be. Like, I think somebody mentioned that maybe we would consider having to keep the crew together to keep them safer. You may have to put your C party in a more expensive hotel to stay together, and maybe hopefully they have room service. Right now, I'm staying in a hotel that has slashed their room service hours and menu to just a 2 days. So then, when I'm in an area where all the stores are closed, we're asking the crew to not go out to bars. Be safe if you're going out. So living on the road has changed, and we're seeing the effects of that we'll have to adapt and take care of the crew differently when they go out on tour, because
I'm gonna give you a real life example of having had to do that in downtown LA. Could have stayed at a perfectly fine hotel, reputable in downtown for $100 a night cheaper, but I had the opportunity to put my folks, because we were going to be in this one particular neck of the woods for 2 weeks to 10 days for some folks, I put us in furnished apartments right down the way from a Ralph's and a Whole Foods. So everyone could run, get groceries, Postmates if that's your thing that you like to do, and then cook at home. And so it's, you know, people love to do that for their dietary reasons. They love to do it to make an egg and a piece of toast and not spend $30 on that in a downtown hotel. So I found that for the well-being and safety of our folks and to encourage them to stay in, we spent a little bit more money, $100 a night. We spent it to keep them in a place where they could eat and stay in more comfortably than crammed into a small hotel room with a desk and a television.
I hate
That's it.
I
you
hate
know?
to say it, and I don't know. I think the way that we're going to draw the line between the major acts and the guys willing to go take the chances, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more residencies, and they're not just going to be in Vegas. You know, I mean, that's the absolute logical way to do this thing, to have the most control.
It does make sense, and to get it, I'm gonna feel like on the topic of budgeting, it's a way you can have control a little better of it, of your budget. You have a lot more control of your budget. You got everybody in one place. You don't have to worry about buses. You don't have to worry about a show canceling.
Jerry Seinfeld in The Beacon. He walks 2 blocks to his house. I mean, there's the example right there, or what the Almonds did. But you know, same kind of idea. And you know, maybe residencies in Chicago, residencies in Philly, in Miami. I mean, it sounds a little bizarro, but there's casinos all over the place these days. So if you want that to be part of the equation, it's not hard to find a stage. And I just see it as being one of the obvious ways that you can have some control. I hate to say it.
That's
'Cause I'm gonna
true.
miss my friends
I
around the
agree.
world.
I agree with you. And there is that bigger window for sponsorship deals and stuff. Like Trey Anastasio is doing the Beacon Theaters every Friday. He walks a couple blocks, like you're saying with Jerry Seinfeld. He lives in New York. He'll go and everything's contained, safe, right there for him. They re-rigged the entire venue where it's facing out towards the crowd, and then the whole light package is all throughout the theater, looking out into the crowd, and it's safe. And they're all wearing masks and playing, and it's a weekly thing. You know, that could be a normal thing.
God bless. Yeah, that's my production manager from my main client, who's is as well. Genius man and doing genius work.
Well, on that note, budgeting 2.0, we definitely got into it today. Thank you so much for everyone that's been here with us. Henry, that you continue to be safe on the road. Larry, thank you for jumping on with us. Judd White, who can't be here with us today, just so insightful on our conversations yesterday. So thank you, Judd. For
a little
for
shout
jumping on
out
with
to
us.
my buddy Jeremy Schilling from Road Radios. Our radio master has joined us for today. Hey, don't forget to put radios in your budget. That can be overlooked.
And to all of our co-hosts that are not with us today, we're always thinking about them. They're all out and they're in recovery. There's everyone's kind of doing their thing. So missing Jim, Doug, who are doing their thing. But thank you everyone who was here with us today. Next Monday is webinar number 35. So,
55.
Oh, 55.
35 was months
I can't even
ago.
keep track anymore.
That's
Yeah, we're going
great.
back in time. We're going back in time.
July.
Episode number 55. We'll be talking logistics 2.0. As always, keep track of our socials. If you missed the webinar today, it's going to be available on our YouTube page, and then you'll see all of our standard posts and stuff like that. And reach out to us if you need anything from today's webinar, and we're here for you guys. So see you
Hey,
next
Larry,
week.
thank you for contributing today. It certainly was great to have you around.
I'd just like to say thank you guys, because I needed this today. I've hit my wall recently. It doesn't seem like it's been however long it's been, but Jesus, this sucks.
It sucks, but we're here. We're doing it. We're doing it so that we
Thank
come
you.
out.
And thank you for
Thank you.
hopping on.
Thank you so much, Larry. Everyone have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on Monday.